I have never purchased a DC Absolute Edition hardcover in all my time collecting DC comics. That is 15 years avoiding the format. Until now. It's morphin' time! Hello, this is Soundout here, and on today's video I am talking about the fact that it has been 15 years of collecting DC Comics, and I've never bought an Absolute Edition. I have thought about it many times before, but every time I look over the list of titles available in the Absolute Edition, I've never found one where I'm like, oh, I love that so much, I want it in a giant premium hardcover. And then after a certain point, I realized, oh man, my first Absolute has to be something special. And so I have, teeter-tottered. If you're wondering, I've looked at like Batman and Son, but I was happy with the Grant Morrison omnibuses because it puts them all together. I've thought about getting the Absolute Fourth World by Jack Kirby. I thought about it up until the point when the DC Finest got announced and they confirmed the contents were going to be in a better reading order, in my opinion, so I decided to go with that. I've thought about some of the events like Kingdom Come or New Frontier, but ultimately decided the editions I had were enough. And then again, it was like, well, if it's going to be my first Absolute after 15 years, it better be something important and special. So that's what this video is about, because I thought, let's track unboxing it, my first opinions of an Absolute Edition in hand, and then also compare the format to other DC Comics formats, and that way you guys have a kind of cool little guide as to what an Absolute is. So that's kind of the point of the video, and then we're going to start here with the unboxing. I'm going to unbox this, my first Absolute Edition. I'm very excited. So if you're excited, hit the like button, hit subscribe and the notification bell so you don't miss out. Hit the hype button if it's available to you. Let's get to it. So obviously we got to start with the unboxing part of this. I'm still debating if I want to put in the thumbnail which Absolute it is, and I'm thinking I probably won't, but I was a little like, you know what, maybe I'll just blur it and I could tease it. So I haven't decided yet exactly, but this is really cool because I've known about Absolute Editions like the entire time I've collected comic books, and yet I've just never done it. They're kind of expensive, that's part of it, and then part of it's, like I mentioned, I love Grant Morrison's Batman run. Their Batman run's one of my favorites. I would want to have Grant Morrison Batman in an Absolute. Sounds great, but when I can get all the story arcs I love in those 3 Grant Morrison omnibuses, I'm pretty happy, and I like having them all in one spot. In case anyone's wondering, not sponsored, but I did buy this through in-stock trades. So I've already taken out a couple pieces of bubble wrap. I love in-stock trades and how they pack stuff. Downside, you can't pre-order things, so you have to kind of be on it when the shop updates on release day. But I was on it for this. Also, we had a windstorm, and I got trapped in my screen door trying to get this box today. So this has been a harrowing adventure. But yeah, in case anyone's wondering, yeah, in-stock trades, probably one of the best at shipping. Cheap graphic novels, that's very nice. Not sponsored by any of them. If any of them want to sponsor me, hit me up, please. I am available. All right, so what do we have here? We have the outer brown mailer, which I do see on a lot of Absolute Editions. This one, I think maybe just because of weight, a little part of this popped a little bit. But it does say the title on here, so I'm not going to tell you. I'm going to open it, but it does have the price and everything. So to preface this, you're probably wondering, well, how did you just? Oh my God, it's beautiful. How did you decide which one you wanted? Right? What was going to be your first Absolute? And the more I thought about it, and the more I looked at it, there was one that had come out that I wanted, but it was so out of print. And I was like, all right, well, when they reprint it, because they got to reprint it at some point, it's too iconic. When they reprint it, I'm picking it up. And they not only reprinted it, they redid it. And so it's better than it ever was. And that is Crisis on Infinite Earths. So this is what I decided. Now, I gotta tell you guys why. And I will go into like the sappy reasons while I open this. There it is. If you've never handled an Absolute Edition, which I've seen them in person, I knew a store that used to sell Absolute Editions. Is not a very common thing. But having it in my house is a different thing. This is massive. Let me grab an Omni. I'm just going to grab a Deluxe Edition, same height. I'll do comparisons in a minute, but that's an omnibus size. Oh boy, I'm so excited. So why did I pick DC's first major comic event, Crisis on Infinite Earths, as my first Absolute? Well, the reason why is because this is my favorite DC comic book of all time. And it's not to say it is the best comic book of all time. I know a lot of people have analyzed it, and they're like, well, it's slow, it kind of drags out, there's a lot of characters that pop in and out, there's a bunch of tie-ins. That's all valid, but here's the thing. To give you a little history while I unwrap this. As a budding comics reader, when I was picking up random singles, it was Batman. It's pretty much just Batman. I opened a pull box at my local comic shop for Batman Beyond, because I love the cartoon. I was watching a lot of DC animation, and so what I would do is I'd watch a DC animated movie like Justice League New Frontier, and then I'd check out from the library like DC New Frontier. It actually took me years to get a copy of New Frontier. And same with Long Halloween. There was I would check them out from the library to check out these stories I heard were so iconic. But I did start to get to a point where I was like, well, I kind of started transitioning. I'm just going to get this off of here without tearing it. I did start transitioning to collecting comics. And so I was at the comic shop, and I saw this paperback for Crisis on Infinite Earths, because I'd been watching the behind the scenes of the DC anime movies from the 2000s and 2010s. Fantastic. A lot of times they do a bonus feature that was like the comic history of the comic they adapted, which I really was a really good benefit for me. And so as I was watching YouTubers talk about DC Comics, as I was watching those bonus features, everyone kept bringing up Crisis on Infinite Earths, Crisis on Infinite Earths, Crisis on Infinite Earths. Post-Crisis was great, this and that. You know, the Under the Red Hood bonus feature is the first time I think I encountered the phrase post-crisis, because they talked about how Jason Todd changed. So I was like, okay, I gotta read this comic, and if it's that important, I should buy it. So I bought a paperback of Crisis on Infinite Earths, which I will bring out later. I just don't want to do it at the same time as this. And I read it, and then I went, oh my god, DC is so much more than just Batman, because that's the thing that is so important to me with this comic. Is not just, you know, that it is the first big event in DC, and they rebooted their continuity, and they merged their multiverse into one universe and all that. It's the fact that this was my introduction to so much of DC Comics that I now love. Dr. Fate, Blue Beetle, Spectre, Commandy, like all these characters that I love and adore now all happened because I read Crisis on Infinite Earths, and I got glimpses of them, and then it made me go, oh, I want to read more of that character. I want to read more of that character. Who's that? And I started looking stuff up. I got myself a DC encyclopedia, and they used the matte paper so it matched. Oh my god. So because of that, I just became a DC fan. It's the transition point for me between being a Batman reader that occasionally read some other DC to being like a DC fan. And I was like, this is when I fell in love with this universe. I started flipping through this. I'm noticing in here there's an introduction by Marv Wolfman, or two introductions by Marv Wolfman from different editions. They've got Crisis letter page inserts in here. This is phenomenal. And by the size of it too is just crazy. Like, this is, you know, it's bigger than an Omni. But the other thing, because it's that matte paper, that like the Warlord, it's not quite lightweight like Warlord, but it's not as heavy as I thought it was going to be. I have a second Absolute edition on the way, by the way. This is like breaking the seal on it. Absolute Batman White Knight came out today, time of filming, and I got it ordered this morning. And I'm looking forward to that, but I haven't loved that comic as long as this, because that comic has not been out as long. So the other thing is they have a second book that's the making of, and it's just pages upon pages of behind-the-scenes material. I probably should look at this with the top-down camera just to make it a little bit easier, but the bonus feature book for this one It's got fold outs. Oh my god, it's like 260 pages of bonus material on top of the other book. And the whole cover price is $125, which is not bad. It's a little bit more. I think the standard price on Absolutes nowadays is $100. I think because White Knight's $100. But White Knight's only an 8-issue series, and then they include like the black and white edition as well. This is 14 issues, 14 oversized issues, plus a bonus features book for $125. For me, I have no problem with that price. But for others, it may be different. So we're going to take a closer look at this. I want to compare it size-wise. I want to compare colors. I want to compare everything. And but right now, I'm going to take this with me, and I'm going to go read it. I don't know if I'm going to read the entire thing tonight before I need to film the rest of the video tomorrow, but this is really great. This is a really great way to start Absolutes. And I'm not going to do videos on all the individual ones, but DC's got me pretty much for 4 more this year. There's White Knight, there's Wonder Woman Historia, there's The Demon by Jack Kirby, and Batman Gotham by Gaslight. So, but it's all starting here. It's all starting here. I don't know if I'm going to go back and get any of the previous ones, but I'm already really impressed by the quality. So let's take a closer look at Absolute Crisis on Infinite Earths and compare it to other formats see how it stacks up to those other editions. All right, so let's take a closer look at the Crisis on Infinite Earths Absolute Edition. I love the logo treatment because this is very much the classic-looking logo, but you got the infinity symbol with all the Earths. It's Infinite Earths, right? I love it. The artwork on the slipcase is just gorgeous. I mean, it just absolutely is. You can see here on the spine, there we got Crisis on Infinite Earths, Marv Wolfman, George Perez. I do love, I will say, and this is just like a nice historical thing, DC switching back to this logo before doing this edition means that this feels right. You can also tell the rainbow holofoil kind of thing going on is gorgeous. On the back, we have what is the cover of the books inside, but it's in pencils with the rainbow effect, which is cool. And then, of course, there is the spines for the actual book, and then the making of. Let's see. On the bottom, of note, I do like how the DC logo is like the start of the Earths here, but it is listed as 150 on the bottom. The little paper slip says 125, and 125 is what was listed on all the retailers that I was looking at it at. So I think they changed the price. I don't know exactly what's going on there. Weird to see a lower price, but hey, I'll take it. But yeah, if we slip this off, we're going to see something really cool here. So you can kind of see there is your pencil sketch of the cover, and there's the cover. Apologies for trying to deal with the size of this. It is quite large, and I'm not exactly sure how to manage that with this setup. I've never had an Absolute Edition before. So these are the 2 books, and this is the interesting part. So this cover of Crisis has been done like this for a long time, which I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Alex Ross redid the colors of this for the trade paperback edition. And so this cover, this mural that George Perez drew, and I don't know if he had any help on it. This over here on the book itself is the original kind of flatter 1980s colors, whereas this is the more painted, more detailed colors. So you have what is the same pencils, but the actual inking and coloring is done differently over here to give it a more realistic texture and tone versus the more comic book texture and tone. And that goes for the comic itself in its more modern printings. And so for me, this cover is how I've always seen it, because this is the trade paperback I have. I forget which edition this is, but this is the version I'm used to seeing. We're going to do a comparison, though, in a moment. But I did want to just talk about the making of book real quick. This is just incredible. I haven't read through this completely, but I did flip through it. It is jam-packed, from the ideas and the scripting to the pitches to the pencils to letters about it to character designs. It is just such an intense... I'm going to be careful not to wreck the pages as I go through. This is such an intense documentation into everything. And I think what's also interesting, too, is it talks about the aftermath of Crisis and how here's all our post-Crisis books and everything. It also mentions like the new DC history of the DC universe is thrown in there, because the history of the DC universe at the end of this book has had a new version, which DC did recently to clean up its continuity once again. It's just, this is incredible. You can see this is the collected edition dust jacket for history of the DC universe. And then back here you have these beautiful posters. And these posters, they're fold-out posters. And here you can see all of these characters from DC's history, right? This is because this is all part of the 50th anniversary of DC. All these characters, and it has a list as to who drew each character. And so you've got the color version and the pencils on the back. I think that's phenomenal to have as an inclusion, because that is part of the history of DC. And then it's also got, of course, the Crisis on Infinite Earths overall drawing here, which is, let me get this, yeah. The collection pencils are by George Perez. The original art was the size of a house door sent to Alex Ross, and then Alex Ross did the painting. You can see some of the reference images. So yeah, it was George Perez and Alex Ross, and that's what this was for the collection. And so this was, you know, Alex Ross's painted style applied. And then here we have the version that appears on the Absolute Edition, which is Jerry Ordway inking the George Perez pencils from 1998, and then colored by Jose Valeria. So this is the new version. So I like that this is kind of done to show, here's what the original colors of this comic look like versus how it's done before. And then there's this version here that's annotated, and it tells you each and every character that's on there and gives you a guide to it, which I think is really, really nice, because it's such a huge, sprawling mural of artwork. And here's the Alex Ross cover for the history of the DC Universe. So this thing is just jam-packed with almost everything you could ever want. Here's another poster. This is the Crisis on Infinite Earths box set from 2019, and its cover. So its cover's there. I love this. I love the fact that we have a whole bonus book of material. But let's talk about this itself, because I did want to talk about a few more things related to the actual comic itself. First things first, let's talk size. So obviously, when you're talking about a premium hardcover from DC, the first question everyone has in their mind is, how is it sized compared to a compact comic? Okay, maybe it wasn't the first question, but I'm answering it. Yes, there is a compact comic in relation to an Absolute Edition. Here is a standard size trade paperback in relation to an Absolute Edition. Here is a deluxe hardcover, which is the same size, trim size as an omnibus. So you can see that. And then I brought in a Dark Horse Library Edition, which are actually the closest comparison I can make. The Dark Horse Library Edition is just a slight smaller, but it is the same height as the Absolute Edition. The Library Editions from Dark Horse, they don't have slipcovers. Or, yeah, they don't have the slipcovers, but there you go, slipcases, whatever you want to call it. So there's that. So, but for DC's main sizes, there's your Deluxe Omni, there's your standard trade paperback, Compendium DC Finest size, there's your compact. So if anyone's wondering the size difference between Absolute, Deluxe, Standard, and Compact, there you go. All nice and covered there. All right, so let's talk about the interiors of the book, because there's a lot of surprises in here that I really appreciated. First of all, you get a new introduction by Marv Wolfman, where he talks about how he thought, him and George, I believe, thought this book would never really matter. They thought that Crisis on Infinite Earths would just be this thing that existed to reboot the universe, and that was it, and nobody would ever remember it after it was done. People were going to focus on what it did, not what it was. And he's just kind of blown away that it still is remembered. We do have the 1998 introduction from the paperback from Marv, which talked about, I thought this very interesting thing is that he was trying to pitch, an idea of a comic book miniseries for a long time, and he mentioned that he was a fan of the Prisoner TV show, which I'm a fan of. I love that show. And he said, as far as I knew, this is the first intentionally limited series, beginning, middle, and a definite end. Even if it was cryptic, I love the idea of a short-run series and wondered why it had never been done in comics. That format would be wonderful, I naively thought, for this pitch of an idea he had where the villain was called the Librarian. Once I became a professional writer, I mentioned my brilliant idea to several editors about DC and Marvel and was promptly told that a limited series would be impossible to sell. I'm going to say this is really fun in perspective because current comics, almost everything's a miniseries now, and there's not a lot of long ongoings. But here is the thing. In 1970, when he first came up with this idea, actually, let me zoom in a little bit so you guys can read this along with me. All right, so in 1970, it says, back in 1970, first issue of comics, I was informed, sold poorly. Readers were suspicious of comics with low numbers, as opposed to, say, Action Comics 450, which indicated it had been around for a long time. Besides, it usually took 6 issues for readers to decide to give a new comic a try. Therefore, a limited series would be half over before sales could begin to improve. I felt like a fool for making that suggestion, shut up, and went back to writing my little mystery series for House of Secrets and Witching Hour. So this part here is just so fascinating that in the 70s, it was seen that comic readers and comic buyers did not want anything that was starting fresh. They wanted something established and already well-loved. And nowadays, the industry chases number ones a whole lot, while a lot of comic readers say, we would love for things to continue longer than just 5 issues. Marvel in particular is pretty guilty of that. They go off issue 1 pre-orders to decide how long a series will run. And I think the thing is, it says it took 6 issues for readers to decide to give a new comic a try. It takes about 6 issues for people to try something out nowadays if they're buying trade paperbacks as opposed to single issues. The story goes, though, that because of the rise of comic book shops in the late 70s, early 80s, it became more doable to do a limited series because comic shop patrons were the types of people who would be willing to try out a new number 1 of a new character and give it a go. And so that's kind of where we got miniseries from. Now, the thing I want to talk about is that Crisis on Infinite Earths was done for the 50th anniversary of DC Comics, and it is, for DC's editorial perspective, they wanted to eradicate the multiverse, cut all the Earths down to 1, and start continuity over to have a fresh jumping on point for readers. And in the introductions, Marv talks about the whole idea is that there should be fresh starting points. The Silver Age for DC, when they introduced Barry Allen and Hal Jordan as Flash and Green Lantern, it was a continuity reboot. The Silver Age was now Earth 1. All the prior Golden Age comics were Earth 2. And so the idea was that for him and for Marv and his generation, that was their fresh jumping on point for continuity. And he feels that comics should have that fresh start for every generation, and that's what keeps comic books going. And that's something that DC's tried to do. Post-Crisis, of course, was a huge jumping on point because they rebooted continuity after this miniseries. And then they've tried since. They've tried rebooting things after Infinite Crisis, but that doesn't quite a full reboot. They tried after the New 52, but they didn't commit to a full reboot. They kept some things from the previous universe instead of just going for a complete reboot. And every relaunch since is still kind of continuing things with minor changes. And so I thought it was interesting that 40 years past Crisis on Infinite Earths and History of the DC Universe, the revised history after Crisis, after these came out, DC has finally hit it. They finally got a new generation of readers with the Absolute Universe. And in that case, it wasn't a let's reboot mainline DC. It was a let's give people a new, fresh starting point so they feel like it's something for their generation and it's made at their point in time and they can be on the ground floor of it. And that has been the Absolute Universe, and it's been a massive, massive success. And so I feel like, that happening and then we getting the new History of the DC Universe has been phenomenal. And I think that coming 40 years after Crisis on Infinite Earths is insanely appropriate. And so I'm glad that DC is doing that. All right, so here's context. Last night, I read the first 4 issues. I probably would have read more because I love this book and I could read it. But the thing that slowed me up was the thing I was so happy to see, which was the letter pages. So letter pages for issue 4 actually start to get letters in from the readers. And it's very interesting to see how the book was received now versus now. Because a lot of people do talk about, wow, they really kill off a lot of characters. Oh, boy, they must have pissed people off. This is an interesting part here is that Marv said here that to the hundreds of others who wrote in, to date we received no negative mail on issue 1. And although I'm sure somebody out there didn't like it, we're incredibly gratified to all those who wrote to say they cared. So they didn't receive any negative mail off the bat. And that's pretty impressive considering issue 1 does wipe out Earth 3 is like the first casualty to go. But a lot of the letters did talk about what I love about this comic is that, yes, DC Editorial is using it as a starting point, but Marv and George are using it as a tribute to the DC Universe. They were celebrating its history and giving a send-off to the old continuity to usher in the next 50 years of DC. And it's incredibly effective at that. One of the first ones we see is Earth 3, the World of the Crime Syndicate, where you have all these evil versions of characters realizing they wasted their life being evil, and they could have used their powers for so much more, because at the end of the day, they served themselves, and their world's being destroyed by an antimatter wave, and all their powers can't do anything about it. I think it's really great, and there's a lot of moments like that throughout the series. And so the first time I read this, I didn't know any of these characters. I only know snippets, things from cartoons and animations and stuff, but I didn't know anything else about them, and it was like my introduction. And now coming back to it so many years later when I've read so many comics since, it all hits different. Like when we see the Western heroes working together, I'm like, oh, I was just reading old Western DC like a couple months ago. The whole sequence with Sergeant Rock and the Easy Company that's in here kind of breaks my heart, because I'm reading the Sergeant Rock DC Finest right now, and I've read a lot of Sergeant Rock since the first time I read this book. So it's just been great to revisit it. Also, Marv Wolfman talked about how The Prisoner was kind of like what gave him the idea of like, oh, we should do miniseries and comics. He made a Prisoner reference here. I never caught this because when I read this book, the last 2 or 3 times I did, I hadn't seen The Prisoner yet. Between the last time I read this and now, I've seen The Prisoner, so I get this joke that, Joker's like making movie references, and Batman's like, only movie you'll ever make, Joker, is the sequel to The Prisoner. And I don't mean the one in that village, because the Prisoner TV show took place in an entire village. Marv slipped that in, and I appreciate it, and it's really great. So, here comes the big comparison, though. This has restored colors. This does not. This is my original copy. I'm going to carefully get this out of the plastic, and let's do some comparisons. All right, so I'm going to be carefully handling my paperback, more so than my giant hardcover, because this is my reading copy now. I don't like to open this up. I just want to show you all. This means so much to me, because this was my original trade paperback that I read Crisis in. And there it is. There's Marv Wolfman, George Perez. I had the pleasure of meeting George Perez at a local convention. Nicest guy. One of the nicest people I ever met. I asked him how much it would cost to get a signature on this book, and he said, oh, you already bought the book, I'll just sign it for you. Wonderful guy. Absolutely wonderful guy. I had a great time chatting with him. Met Marv Wolfman a few years later. He was at a convention locally, at a booth with no sign even. He was just sitting at a table by himself, no handler, and I was like, this is very strange for a legend in the comic book industry. Terrific person. Great guy. Had a great conversation with him. Very humble. I asked him. I was like, well, I got the book signed by George, and he was like, oh, did George sign it for free? And I was like, yeah, he did. And he's like, well, I'm a writer, and I don't have any art prints to sell or commissions. And I was like, well, how much would it cost for you to sign my copy of Crisis? And he was like, $10 so I can get some coffee. Amazing guy. Amazing meeting both of them. Treasured memories forever. And to have it on the copy that I originally read was what meant a lot to me. Like some other people getting signatures for comics might want to get it on a fancier edition or get a single issue or something. Like that. That is understandable. For me, because this was the trade that I originally read this story in, that's the copy I wanted signed. And I feel incredibly blessed to have gotten to meet both of them. And I love it. So this is why I don't touch this copy that often, because I want to make sure nothing happens to this. This means a lot to me. So let's go into this. There's the 1998 introduction from Wolfman. What printing is this? This is a curiosity. This is it's a 2009 printing date. Wow, yeah. So I got this in 2009, 2010-ish. So here we are. So you can see, let's start from the top. Let's start from the cover, because this is kind of how Crisis has been presented. And there's nothing really wrong with it. I mean, that's pretty close, but it is a little modern-y. Let's take a look at the first page. So this version here this version in the original trade here has been touched up. You can kind of see the color differences. Also, this is on a glossier paper. This is on a more matte paper. So this kind of matches how the original version of the comic felt. But you can sort of see, I think part of this is the paper, and part of it is the process. You can kind of see that, like, the colors are flatter on the matte paper compared to the glossy paper. And that's probably the biggest difference between these, is that everything's got, like, sharper lines, sharper edges, and that's fine. It honestly, it's not as bad as, like, the recolor on Saga of Swamp Thing by Alan Moore, or the Killing Joke recolor. That I don't even like the Killing Joke, and that recolor drives me up a wall. But this just feels so much closer to the original comic, and I know I've seen some comparison shots that this matches the original printed issues better. I think mostly one of the biggest things is the paper, but I also know they went back and touched it up. Here's a perfect, I finally got like a good distinctive color change. You can see how there's this yellow sunlight type thing going on, and it's very yellow, whereas here it's more of a gold, more mustardy color. This light here is yellow. It's red over here. Yeah, this is actually, you know, now that this is my first time doing this comparison, if you can't tell, the modern coloring on this and the digital process on this, not too bad. You know, I've seen much worse recoloring, but to get it back into this to where it matches the original printed issue better, I think is great. Like, you see, I love the contrast of the pink with the blue spots instead of pink with purple spots, and Harbinger being in a pink outline instead of a blue outline. I just like the contrast better. It's just what it is for me, big historical archive guy. So for me, it's like, oh wow, we've gotten back to exactly what it originally was intended to be when it was first done. And I think that, to me, makes the whole thing worth it. Now, if you're somebody, I think I already mentioned this, but if you want this original coloring on a nice form and you don't want to buy the Absolute, the DC Finest collections that collect Crisis plus all of the tie-ins, those have this one. Oh, I like this better. Harbinger's reflection in Blue Beetle's eye lenses is blue. Here it was kind of like, it was more detailed, and this one looks more realistic. This one looks cooler. That's just what it is. You know, I think it's just what it is. That this, seeing it in the original form side by side now, it's green here. Why is it blue here? Oh, there's like the red sparkle around Arion's magic. It was blue. More realistic, more fun. I very much prefer when comics can match the original. All right, there's red there. It turned it to pink here. Yeah, Firestorm's effects were red here. They're more pink here. Killer Frost, yellow, purple. It's little things like that that don't make too much of a difference, but I do prefer this. Well, you know what? This is actually not too bad. They kind of added some Kirby crackle to this part of the monitor's station, whereas this is just kind of more blank. You know, I kind of... It's not to say that either version is better than the other, but this is definitely how it was originally presented. And I think that's kind of like... It kind of makes me happy that this is my reading copy, and then this is my sentimental copy of being my first copy I owned, and it's signed by Marvin George, and I'm putting it back in plastic. I just want to keep it safe. I keep it protected. It's on a separate shelf. This means so much to me. This means a lot to me as well, in it being my first Absolute. And I think that I'm so glad I waited on the Absolute format all these years to get my favorite DC book in Absolute first. Because now this feels special on several levels, in addition to being like a fantastic new version of this. Like, it just looks gorgeous. I can't wait to read the rest of it. So I'm going to stop gushing because I'm like, I feel like I'm getting a little repetitive, but I'm really happy with my first Absolute edition is kind of the point. So in conclusion, I waited 15 years to buy an Absolute edition, and I'm really happy it was Crisis. This book just means a lot to me, and rereading it has not changed my opinion. I still love it so much, and I'm so glad to have this edition with all the bonus material. And it does kind of reaffirm to me that buying 4 more Absolute editions this year is something I want to do. It's insane to be doing that. Don't take financial advice from me, but I just wanted to chart this journey, and I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, hit the like button, hit subscribe, and the notification bell if you haven't already. Hit the comments. Tell me if you've bought any Absolute editions, and if you did, which one was your first. Curious to know. Also, Check out the Discord server in the link below if you want to continue the conversation. You can also join as a channel member and get perks like early access to videos. Let's give some special shout outs to some of our channel members. Special shout out to all of our channel members, including Captain Tears, Spin-54, Forever1000, Masterbin95, Veloquince, Mr. Smelly Potato, Alt Mode Archive, Alice James, Taran Thomas, Actual Lee, Common Jojo, MP, Joseph Tuchek, Star Who, Jason Day, Grizzly3, Legacy Spock, Ben, and LFIV. Thank you all for your support of this channel, viewers and channel members alike. If you so wish, I'm on social media on Blue Sky and Letterboxd at Soundout12. You can find my wonderful graphic designer on social media and Discord at DarkClaw643, and you can find Hero Club at HeroClub.com for comic reviews and more. And until next time, I'm going to go read Crisis on Infinite Earths in its Absolute Edition, because holy cow, it looks so gorgeous like this.